Hi, welcome everyone. I am thrilled to have you join us this episode on our brand new webinar series and podcast with Practical CSM, where we bring together leading voices from the customer success world. For those of you that are new to this episodes, our How to Build series is all about practical advice on helping you create and strengthen your top performing customer success teams. Throughout this series, we'll be diving into essential topics like training strategy, leveraging data, harnessing the power of automation and AI, which you might be here for today. And we are really designing these to be practical advice to get you stay ahead of the game. So as the topic says, we're here to talk about AI today, and I'm really excited to welcome a true expert on this space in customer success and AI cross-functionality, Natalia Piaggio. Natalia has conducted an extensive research into the AI in customer success space in the last couple of months, and will be sharing hands-on experience how to apply this to your customer success teams. So joining our conversation, please feel free to ask questions in this chat. We will be tackling the topic today in two more terms of like how to build your effective AI strategy in customer success. Especially for those of you that are here to learn something new, we'll be sharing some practical examples on implementing your AI strategy. Natalia will actually give you some top tips on prompting strategies, and then we'll have a look at your actual research that she gained from some of you that are on the call today, and how that relates into things that you can implement straight away. So a little bit of housekeeping. We have the live chat going on in the right-hand side. So if there's anything that you want to pick up and get your questions answered, we'll get to those at the end of the session. You'll also see a little form in there, a link, which allows you to then be able to sign up through a form to get this wonderful ebook that Natalia has actually produced. So we're really excited to be sharing that resource as well through this call. Without further ado, Natalia, it's fantastic to have you here to share your wonderful expertise and your research. So just let's dive in. Now, before we get underway, most of you may know you because obviously you've seen a lot of you on LinkedIn, but maybe you can do a 5-second brief intro to yourself.
Absolutely. So first of all, pleasure to be here. Thanks, Minna and Practical CSM for organizing this. Just a little bit about me. I've been in customer success leadership roles for a little over 15 years and 22 years in service level organizations, working all the way from startups to multi-billion-dollar companies across a number of sectors. But SaaS and customer experience are very much at the heart of most of the solutions I've been working with. And lately, I've been working mostly with healthcare support and care providers. And that's a little bit about me.
And then in the pre-show, you shared with me that you have invested a lot of time in the last couple of months into AI in CS and CX. So tell us more. What interested you? Can you give a brief summary on your insights and takeaways?
Absolutely. So I'll start with a little bit of context. A little over a year ago, I was determined to implement AI in the business I was leading. And probably like many others, I dove in head first, and I was talking to vendors, testing tools, chasing trends, and honestly, suffering of a lot of FOMO. I always thought everybody else was doing something better than we could be doing. And I thought that the key was to try everything. And then I stopped and I reflected, and I realized that I was doing it all wrong. And I was very busy, but not strategic. I was evaluating without a clear purpose, and I was confusing activity with progress. And what I should have done was to focus on real customer problems and outcomes and aligning AI to support those. And that's really what led me to write this ebook and be on today's masterclass, is really to help others avoid the same missteps. And in order to do that is when I tapped into the wonderful community that we have in customer success and customer experience to, really make sure that I could bring in not just the theory, but also, what are the CS leaders around the world doing when it comes to implementation on AI, and what are the challenges that are facing. If you like, I could go on and share a little bit more around the secondary research and the primary research, to just give you some headlines, because obviously I invested a lot of time on it, and I won't be able to go through it all, but should I do that?
Yeah, and firstly, obviously, thank you for everyone who is on the call and may have contributed to the research. But I think it's really interesting to hear that you're saying you thought you were behind the curve, but actually, I think you found from the research that you were ahead of the curve.
Not sure about ahead of the curve, but definitely the FOMO started to be less of a problem. And then, I think, again, yes, this wouldn't have been possible without the 72 people that, took the time to either talk to me or, filling a survey so we could gather those insights. So this is real grounded, practical, takes. I'll start with the secondary research highlights. And, just to give you some context, I consumed a lot of content over the past 2 months. I reviewed over 200 AI tools. I've done courses. I signed up to a lot of newsletters, went to conferences, and followed, if probably not stalked, some of the thought leaders on the field. And I would say the first insight is that AI won't replace you, but someone using AI might. We need to think about AI as a new electricity. And just like it transformed every major industry a century ago, AI will do the same. And in a context of a world where we are seeing some of the biggest brands in the world now, slashing budgets and cutting jobs, staying relevant in these nice to have jobs, especially around customer success and customer experience, is really imperative. But for this, actually, leveraging AI represents an opportunity instead of a threat. The second insight is that the real threat isn't AI itself, it's us outsourcing our thinking. And I think it's super important that we make sure that we don't blindly follow AI outputs, because we're not using AI if we do that. AI is using us. So staying curious and analytical is now more important than ever. And we need to remember that success in AI depends as much on people as it does on technology.
And if I comment on that, recapping that, that's what I hear a lot. People saying there are now more AI posts, AI generated emails, and it doesn't feel human anymore, right? So AI should be augmenting what you're doing, not the end result, right?
Yeah, it's so obvious now, right? And also, how you feed in your own style, and, and you really kind of like go through an iterative process is super key. The third trend is the concerning representation gap. And we need to think very thoroughly about this, because we need to keep in mind that AI adoption is not equal. There's an HBR report that states that women are 25% less likely to embrace AI. And this is a sign of a broader representation issue. And we need to think about other groups that are underrepresented: gender diverse individuals, elderly people, ethnic and racial minorities, people with disabilities, low-income groups, migrants, non-native speakers, people that are employed, and rural populations. And this is especially concerning when we are dealing with customer interactions, where fairness, tone, and trust are critical. And especially for those brands that are particularly working with vulnerable customers and in highly regulated sectors like financial services, healthcare, or government. So it's super important that CS and CX leaders think about auditing for bias, testing across diverse segments, and involving underrepresented voices, because we could be causing more harm than good when we use these models that are not representing your true customer base. The fourth insight is around the future of AI, and thinking that AI actually could allow us to become more human than ever. If we automate all those mundane tasks, we should creating more space for more empathy, to build stronger strategies, to build stronger human relationships. I'm not seeing that happening, and we'll deep dive on that later. And the fifth takeaway is around learning agility and how important it is to think about how AI innovation is evolving faster than Moore's exponential curve. So we need to stay relevant and establish learning habits personally and across our teams. And we need to learn every day, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever you can, but really building that muscle.
Yeah. So I guess that's your secondary resource and research, and that comes really from the industry and everything else. Now, I'd love to hear also what you learned about from the CS leaders themselves.
Absolutely. And this is where I learned the most, right? And thank you again for those that contributed to this. The first one is that most CS and CX teams are in transitional phase. So there's a lovely maturity model by a woman, Katie King, that, in the ebook, I go into a lot more detail on this, where basically what we're seeing is CS leaders and CX leaders are really in experimenting stage, and that really don't have integrated workflows or thinking of customer success and customer experience and AI in a really strategic way. There's widespread adoption, so 89% of respondents are using some sort of AI. What's interesting is ChatGPT definitely has a first mover advantage. 41% are using ChatGPT, but only 12 tools were mentioned across all respondents. And this was, to me, really staggering comparing to the 200 plus AI solutions that are out there for us to look into, right?
Very narrow.
Very, very narrow. So not much depth at all. And also most of the use cases are focusing on productivity gains, not strategy. And this is really important. In terms of productivity, really what we saw is that the rating of effectiveness is 3.6 out of 5. And this is around mostly meeting preparation, helping with note summarizations, account research. But there was an interesting complaint from a customer not long ago that said there's more no AI note takers and actual callers in here, right? It just gets to a point where, everybody has their note taker and we all say, oh yeah, we have AI and we'll take notes, but, and it's just getting a little bit clunky. And we also have to be aware of some sensitivities on it, where especially people and customers in, public sector or local government are more reluctant to have AI note takers. So just a side note on that. And last two key trends or key takeaways from the primary research, which were really staggering. The first one is, while we see some positive signs of productivity gains, the metrics are still very weak. Only 7% of respondents stated that they can have clear, measurable gains on customer outcomes, right? So there's still a lot to go for and a lot to improve when we're looking at, the AI implementation. And when it comes to challenges, 3 really stood out. The first one, a staggering 64% reporting that data integration is a major issue or blocker. Then team adoption and mindset, and this is the change management piece. And lastly, what I shared earlier, a lot of leaders struggling to measure the impact of their AI initiatives.
Yeah, interesting. So if I was to summarize that, sounds like we're in this bell curve of early adoption, and some have gotten to the more maturity level, but not a lot yet. And it sounds like they don't. The things that are hindering them back is data and the actual really thinking this strategically. Am I right on that?
Absolutely. On top of adoption, it's interesting. Some individuals, especially, individuals that have been on the job for 20 years, say, that a lot of it is in their heads, right? Yeah. And they fear that, if they start using AI, they'll be replaced, right? If we start building, this is documentation you have so that a robot can do what I'm doing, there's a lot of fear. And so that's the change management piece is absolutely critical too.
Yeah. So I guess that that really gives us idea on where you build your ebook, which is the idea on how to implement AI. So could you tell us a little bit about your top tips there? I know we don't have time to summarize your whole book, but like for the audience, it'd be good to hear what you can learn out of it.
Absolutely, and it's a good challenge that I have to really rattle this through in 15 minutes versus a full hour. But I think the most important thing is to think about it as an analogy, right? Successfully implementing AI is like building a house. So you don't start by going and buying the furniture and the materials, which, given the weakness that I have for shopping, is where I would have liked to start. What we need to think about is, first you have to have a plan, right? So you begin with a very clear blueprint, which is your AI strategy. You plan each room with a purpose and a use case: the kitchen, the bathroom, the dining room. Every room serves a need. Then you go into building strong foundations to support that home. And we do this by prioritizing and having an operating model. There's always something that goes wrong. So expect disruption and expect change management. Equip your team with the right tools and shared techniques. Make sure that, you pilot and you start small. Like, when you're testing wall colors, right? You first test and then you go for it. Choose fit for purpose materials. So those AI tools, again, right? You buy specific paint type for the bathroom and the kitchen versus other rooms. Train your crew, and more importantly, install safeguards, the fire extinguishers, the smoke alarms, the emergency exits. All of the ethics around AI and the security are absolutely critical. And last but not least, design with the future in mind. Are you planning to have kids? Do you want to have friends and family over? Do you want to have pets? So a thoughtful build that leads to scalable and resilient AI-powered organization is just like building a house. Now, I put this together in a more detailed framework of 10 steps. To summarize it really, really quickly, the first 2 steps are around foundation and leadership. Walk the talk when it comes to customer success. We talk about success plans, but we don't do them ourselves. So set baselines, define KPIs, put goals together, lead from the top, identify those use cases, and really avoid scattered efforts. Steps 3 and 4 are around strategic prioritization and change management. And I cannot emphasize enough how important this is. First, prioritize the high value activities that align with your business strategy. And then, also go for some quick wins so you can really get people on board and demonstrate the value and, and go on and gain more sponsors along the way. And lead with change management mindset to bring everybody along in the journey. Again, success really depends as much on people as it does on technology. Steps 5 and 6 are around knowledge sharing and iteration. So you need to think about really making sure that you have some sort of knowledge management system, whether it's SharePoint or whatever you use, and make sure that you share your libraries, your prompt libraries with your team and your cross-functional teams. And again, pilot, pivot, pilot again, and refine and redefine constantly. It's all about experimentation. And just to give you a fun fact, when I was doing the ebook, I was using a lot of, different tools, Perplexity, Claude, ChatGPT. And when I was using Claude, one of the elements took me 37 prompts. Yeah. And then how should I have done this in less steps? So you learn from the prompt. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the level, and that goes to say, I'm by no means an expert, but this is what it takes, right? It's just practice that makes master. And then we go into technology and learning culture. And this is where you'll be looking at, making sure, yes, you adopt, best in class tools. Some businesses will go for internal solutions. But the key is really kind of like that continuous improvement and that commitment to always be at the top of AI, because the game is, is just so competitive out there. and establishing very, rigorous learning habits. As I said earlier, you have to really think about getting your team to learn from AI every day. So I think one key thing here to bring everybody in the learning curve, maybe some gamification. One of the things that you could do is do AI Fridays competition. What's the best prompt of the week? Things like this that really get everybody excited and on board, to really start building that muscle and making sure that everybody shares. And last but not least, as I mentioned, risk management, right? I think that it's so important that we address all data risks and ethical concerns around AI, and that we really think about a long-term strategy. You have to even be ready to share your AI strategy and guidelines with your customers. Don't be surprised if tomorrow they'll be asking for them.
I'm sure in some of the security audits that will come up. Interestingly, Huang just asked a question about some activities and campaigns to encourage the internal teams to apply AI more in their daily tasks. I think you mentioned one there, which was the gamification.
Yeah.
What did you learn this week? What prompts did you try? So we'll tell you more, Huang, on a couple of things that we thought about talking about. One being our next idea of telling you some prompts and that you could go away and try straight after this call. So maybe Natalia, you could introduce you some of this learning that you did out of the 37 steps that you tried prompting Claude, and what did you actually learn on like?
I shared the prompt on the ebook, then we find one just so I can save people some time. So there's three key pillars when we think about, prompting in customer success and customer experience. The first one is around productivity, and most CS and CX leaders are here, right? It's really around, summarization of calls and, I'm preparing for meetings and things like that. But what I liked about one specific prompt here was, again, because we're all doing it, if you have a transcript, be very specific around what you want it to give it back to you. So ask for key decisions made, action items and owners, risks or concerns, next steps, timeline, and more important than anything, also the format and the style, concise and professional for key stakeholders, etc. Right. Mm-hmm. Another one that was really interesting was for new team members, right? Sometimes QBR can be a bit daunting, and they have the slides, but then they don't know how to deliver them. So you can put the PowerPoint out there and ask the LLM that you use to give you a script, so they can feel a bit more prepared on how to go through the conversation with a customer. The second pillar was around customer experience improvements. And one that I really liked was based on this customer profile data, and you give it a data dump, obviously in a secure environment, provide me with key business goals and how they align to our business, potential expansion opportunities, risk factors, and personalized engagement suggestions for the next quarter, and how do I word them. Then last but not least, and this was the weaker area, but this is why I'm going to give you more examples, is because I really want to make sure that people attending this really feel empowered and motivated to go and try some of these different strategies. One was around negotiation. So a general purpose AI tool that generates additional ideas and arguments during price negotiations. So just, having this conversation with his customer, and really kind of like helping you prepare on scenarios. Another one was a Claude dashboard created to provide customers with business outcomes, so they can see, which workflows work best for them. Mm-hmm. Another one that I really loved was around doing regular competitive SWOT analysis. We're sometimes so inward looking at our own renewals, our own expansion, and, there's so much information out there that we're not really leveraging. So that was a good one. Another one was for preps for board meetings and providing, an executive summary of, what are the health score trends, what's the revenue impact, what are the risks and opportunities, and what are the recommended actions. And obviously you'll have to correct a lot of that and, revise it, but it's a good next, starting point. One that I really liked. Yeah.
Internally or externally? So when are you preparing that for a customer, right?
That's for a board. No, that's internal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's for internal. Okay.
Yeah, but good point. That could be same use case
For
external, right? So and that's again, right? This is how, we're just scratching the surface here. Another one that I really liked, and I'll just share two more, and then we move on to the next step in the interest of time, is providing, the LinkedIn profile of a persona, and then asking them, tell me about the unmet needs of this persona for our business, right? And then kind of like white space stakeholder management. So you provide all of the contacts that you're speaking to, and you say, where should I expand my relationship and how should I communicate to them? So
for influentials for this account.
Exactly. Multi-threading, right? So sometimes we constantly going to the same Salesforce and trying to speak to the same people that are ignoring us. And this is kind of like really helping us reach out to other stakeholders that we may have not, maybe they just joined the business.
Yeah. Well, if I summarize that, it's curiosity, right? Like try different prompts. I recently did a deep research. So if you click on Perplexity or Claude or ChatGPT and change it to deep research, you can get amazing amount of data on any company that you're working with, and including stakeholders and whatever prompts you're adding in there, and take about 5 minutes and save you about 2 hours. Anyway, so hopefully those are some practical tips. Again, you can find some of those in Natalia's ebook, so do sign up with that form. We've got a couple more minutes left before we're kind of having to sadly close this, but I think maybe if we go back to the research a little bit, can you just share a little bit more? What do you think was surprising for you? I know you sent a couple of numbers in terms of where we are at the moment, but was there anything else that stood out for you?
Yeah, a combination of things. So the first one is the rate of innovation. It was so hard to keep up with everything that was going on. It's a whirlwind of innovation. If you think of just, some of the biggest vendors out there, they shipped just in the last 6 months, 50 significant breakthroughs, all the way from agentic AI, autonomous agents, multimodal, capabilities, coding assistance, and a lot of especially domain-specific platforms. And that's why, I put together, the 200 plus. These were more, this is not even talking about the 39 LLMs out there. Those are kind of like generic across the board. Just, 200 plus on CS and CX. And this is by no means exhaustive, right? And so it was just so hard to keep up. The second one, and I mentioned this again, but I want to mention again, for me, it's a huge surprise, the representation gap and what this really means as CS and CX leaders, because we are potentially facing a vicious circle. And we really need to think about those underrepresented segments, because if we're not feeding in that data, the models are biased and the inequalities are wider and wider. Right. And this is relevant both for people in their careers as well as for consumers, especially those vulnerable customers. And the last one, although there were many surprises, but the last one I think it's worth highlighting, and we touched on it, is just the lack of depth. The productivity gains are not really translating for most of the, leaders that answered the survey into real strategic, human-centered strategies. So, and that's really staggering, because if we don't really tackle that, we're at risk of obsolescence. I sense that AI, for the most part, is being treated as a side project, but it really needs to be at the heart of everything we do. And we need to bring everyone along the journey, both internally and externally, right? So that was probably the three that I would highlight as the three favorite ones that, you know, really hit home.
Yeah, sounds like, again, if you think about, you know, customer success in its principle and project management, if you don't have the right project plan and you just do things haphazardly, it's probably going to go wrong. And this is probably the same with your AI strategy. So I know that we're almost at the hour. I would love to get some more questions if anyone has them. So please feel free to share them. I will, as usually, come back to you with the last, what do you want people to remember from this, especially when it comes to future of AI? So, you know, if we're at the rate of change right now, where do you think we'll be in 1 to 3 years time in AI with customer success? What would be your crystal ball prediction, Natalia?
Yeah, it's hard to predict next week, let alone the next 1 to 3 years. But I would say overall, what we need to be thinking about is, if we think of the different maturity stages that I mentioned from, you know, Katie King's wonderful work on the maturity of AI, right? We are really in transitional stage, and we really need to move on to traditional and transformational. So, you know, all of the things that we're doing in terms of automation, personalization, you know, predictive scoring for churn and expansion, embedded intelligence, and more integrated workflows, and an ecosystem of, you know, integrated data. We need to do that thinking strategically and with proper governance to really build significant competitive advantages in customer relationships, in operational efficiency, and to drive business value both internally and externally.
Brilliant. Well, we got a question there. Curious to hear if you have seen any trends around AI agents in CS.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead and please tell us a little bit more about
that. So there's it's a lot to share in this forecast, but in this masterclass. But what I would start with is an incredible amount of especially support tools are doing agentic AI. And so when I reviewed the 200, there's in the ebook, there's an Excel sheet that looks at, you know, which of these vendors are using agentic AI. And I think it was about, you know, 50% that are doing it, right? So it's becoming more common than we think. The problem is not doing it right. And I'll give you an example, a real life example. Last week, my car broke down. I had my disabled daughter with me. It took me 35 minutes to speak to somebody. Yeah. To then, I had to download 2 apps to then speak to a third party, to another third party. And, you know, and then I finally spoke to somebody that was reading a script, had zero empathy on the situation, right? So we're not doing it right? And that's, I think, what's important is, yes, agentic is happening and we're doing it. The problem is we're not doing it well.
Yeah, and I've seen it a lot more in customer support at the moment than necessary customer success. And again, we're seeing, you know, that breach between proactive and reactive. And I think it's definitely infiltrated the reactive space so far, but not so much yet. Yes, not so much on the proactive yet. It will. I'm sure it will, and we'll find out what, you know, the big players are going to do about that soon enough. But listen, it's been a super to talk to you, Natalia. There would be so much more we could cover on this topic. I'll emphasize again, there is the link to the form. So if you want to read more, the primary research, the secondary research, as well as Natalia's building the house model in terms of it, like getting your AI strategy right and implementation. The form is in the comments, so please go ahead and click on that. You'll also be helping us to keep the research going, so that would be brilliant. And for those of you starting your AI journey, we're all on that same road, so let's keep on that same journey together. Thanks everyone for attending today's session. Love to keep the conversation going. Feel free to reach out to either of us on LinkedIn, and we'll look forward to keeping the conversation flowing. Thanks so much, Natalia, for taking the time to tell us more, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. Bye-bye
My
for now.
pleasure. Thank you. Bye.